Hello everyone, and welcome back to Translationborne, the show where we talk about translation, Bloodborne, and the translation of Bloodborne. We're going to be using a new character today thanks to some recording issues, and these are her stats. They're pretty similar to where we left off with our last character. So with that out of the way, let's take a look at this item description. Iron Helm with Black Hood, an iron helmet worn by the Hunters of the Hidden Ward. Connected with the Mensis sect that presides over the Hidden Ward, these kidnappers are hunters in name only, and they wear the black hood low over their eyes. This protective mask is one of the rare pieces of hunter attire made of metal, and has a high defensive value purely in regards to physical attacks. Now, I find most of this translation to be fairly straightforward, but there are a couple of interesting choices on display here regarding these kidnapper hunters and their relationship to the School of Mensis. First of all, there's the use of the formulation "answer to" in the official translation, while the more literal version I've provided of this phrase states only that the kidnapper hunters are connected with the school. This is a change I think not only makes sense, but also works very effectively. In my more literal rendering, I've noted that the Mensis sect presides over the Hidden Ward, meaning that if these kidnappers are connected with them, the hunters probably aren't in a position of superiority over the school. So, saying that these hunters answer to the School of Mensis establishes this power dynamic, while at the same time revealing that there's a connection. It's a good use of phrasing that subtly conveys information while also remaining concise. By contrast, the second translation choice I think is interesting here is something I'm a bit less clear on. In the official translation, the School of Mensis is openly acknowledged to be the founders of the Unseen Village. In the Japanese, however, they're only described as presiding over the area. This interests me not only because I'm unsure where the information comes from, but also because it would seem to establish the School of Mensis as something that's been around for a long time. To have founded the Unseen Village, rather than simply taken it over, implies to me that this school oversaw the district from its beginning, and the buildings we see there undoubtedly would have taken quite a while to construct. On the other hand, if they've simply seized control of the district, which is just as likely as anything else if all we know is that the school currently presides over the Unseen Village, then it's possible the organization has been around for a much shorter span of time. I'm curious as to whether the translation team had any input from the developers regarding this wording, because it really is the kind of change that could have some major ramifications. For now, though, I guess I'll have to settle for getting some answers out of this machine gunner. What do you have to say?
Well. How did you get in here? It's no matter. What brings you to Old Yharnam? I've no interest in matters further up, but you must not disturb this place. The beasts do not venture above, and mean no harm to anyone. If you still insist on hunting them, then I will hunt you first. You understand me?
Sure, I'll hold off on hunting them.
Yes, very good. I no longer dream, but I was once a hunter too. There's nothing more horrific than a hunt. In case you fail to realize, the things you hunt, they're not beasts. They're people. One day you will see. It's time you got going. But first, a farewell gift. I have no use for it anyway.
Well, hey, thanks for the stuff. Have you got anything else?
What is it? Surely I need not repeat myself. Go, I say. You have the whole night to dream. Make the best of it.
Okay, thanks for the advice, I guess.
Go.
But in all seriousness, the thing that I'd really like to focus in on out of that whole string of dialogues is a phrase from the official translation that, if examined in terms of straight definitions, may seem like it's missing something. Specifically, I'm referring to the line that in the official translation reads, "The things you hunt, they're not beasts, they're people." And the more literal version I provided was, "You're not hunting beasts, those are people, after all." And it's the term that's being represented by that "after all" that I'd like to talk about. It comes from the usage of the word "yahari" from the original Japanese line. It's a term that can be tricky to deal with in a lot of circumstances, since there's not really an English equivalent. my Japanese Daijisen dictionary gives 4 definitions. The first is that it can be used to denote something that hasn't changed from the past or from a number of different possibilities. So you might use it to say something to the effect of, "So, you still go to that same old place?" The second definition is that it can be used to indicate an outcome in line with the speaker's intuitions or expectations. You hear this one a lot. If I were to say, "Yeah, he never showed up, just like I thought," it would be the equivalent of the "just like I thought" part of that phrase. The third way that Yahari can be used is to demonstrate that in spite of a great deal of thought, the ultimate result was the same as before. If I were to say, "I thought of a bunch of different options, but in the end, I just decided to stay home," Yahari would be like "in the end" in that sentence. The fourth and final definition is apparently an archaic one used to indicate that something is present without moving, but it's clearly not relevant in this case. Of those 3 different possibilities then, I think it's the third sense of the word, the one that involves the speaker relating the ultimate outcome of many different considered alternatives, that's being used here. In my reading of this situation, Djura's usage of Yahari in the original Japanese indicates that he sees this information about the beasts being people as the deliverance of a harsh but undeniable truth. That's why I've made use of the phrase "after all" in my more literal version. The problem is that if you do simply translate this as "after all," it not only is unclear what exactly is meant by that phrase, but it also weakens Djura's declaration. If he sees himself as stating a harsh but undeniable truth, you'd think he'd want to state it as strongly as possible. And in English, the simple declaration of "the things you hunt, they're not beasts, they're people," is about as strongly as you can phrase things. So in this case, one of the best ways to reflect what I see as the sentiment of the original is not to try and force a translation of every last word, but to look at the ultimate meaning and consider a way to get across the proper tone. And in fact, I think you can also see some of this at work in the previous line. By saying, "in case you failed to realize," as opposed to a more literal, "but remember this," I think the former is better at showing how Djura is attempting to convey to us a harsh but undeniable truth in the hope that he will leave an impression. I think it's a good sense for sense translation. But let's look at this item. Yahar'gul Black Garment. Thick black garb that the hunters of the Hidden Ward are clad in. Connected with the Mensis sect that presides over the Hidden Ward, these kidnappers are hunters in name only, and this garment blends into the night. It's an article of attire focused mainly on providing physical defense, but the straw rope serves as both a method of capture and a certain type of protective charm. So most of that item description probably sounded very familiar from the Black Hooded Iron Helm that we opened the episode with. Actually though, the Black Hooded Iron Helm, the Yahar'gul Black Garb, and the other 2 articles of attire in this set all have some differences in wording. The description of the helm mentions it being made of metal, with a hood to cover the eyes, while the chest garb and the other 2 pieces of attire talk about blending into the night. Also, the final line of the descriptions for the gloves and the trousers is noticeably shorter than the one used to talk about the chest garb, and as it happens, it's the extended version of that final line on the Yahar'gul Black Garb that I think contains some of the most noteworthy translation choices. There are 2 in particular that I'm thinking of, and the first involves the implications of the terms used to describe the more offensive use of the rope that can be seen dangling from the outfit. In the official translation, this rope is said to both protect its wearer and restrain his foes. A more literal version of that line, on the other hand, describes the rope as being for use in capture. In fact, the kanji used to represent the Japanese term in question are quite instructive here. The word is hobaku, and the first character literally means catch or capture, while the second character means tie up or restrain. So it breaks down very simply into catch and restrain, and the term itself is often used to describe the action of the police arresting someone. What I think is interesting then is that though the wording chosen in the official translation is perfectly accurate here, the kidnapper hunters who wear this garb do use the rope to restrain their foes, I feel like simply emphasizing the restraining side of things subtly de-emphasizes the nuance of capturing someone also present in the term. It's a small point, and one perhaps only relevant to my own interpretation of things, but reading this item description in Japanese struck me as much more nefarious as a result. They're literally using the ropes we can see to capture, restrain, and kidnap people. While all the pieces of the puzzle are still present there in English, somehow I didn't really put them together in the same way. Interestingly, the second translation choice I wanted to bring up involves something along these same lines. It's a case where the full nuance of the Japanese word arguably goes a bit beyond what the English describes, and it involves the other, more defensive aspect of the rope that runs around this piece of attire. Again, the official English is fairly simple here. It says that the binding of thick rope serves both to protect its wearer and restrain his foes. My more literal rendering, on the other hand, goes into a bit more detail on what sort of protection is provided. I've written out, the straw rope serves as both a method of capture and a certain type of protective charm. And when I say charm here, I really mean that in the sense of a magical or spiritual charm meant to provide protection. The Japanese uses the term majinai, which my Daijisen Japanese dictionary defines as a means of borrowing the power of the gods or other mysterious entities to either cause or protect against disaster. Intriguingly, as you may have noticed from that description, particularly when written with the kanji used here, this is something that can be bad as often if not more often than it is good. So apparently this rope serves as a kind of nefarious good luck charm for the kidnapper hunters who use it. This is all nuance that seems to be lacking from the official English, unfortunately, but given that I'm sure they had very limited character space to deal with for this one brief portion of a line after maintaining consistency across the entire rest of the item description, I can understand why this kind of thing would have been difficult to convey. Especially since functionally they want to emphasize this suit only provides physical protection. And on that note, we've reached the end of this particular episode. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for me, I would be more than happy to hear them. Thanks for watching, everyone.